Hi, my name is AJordan, and this afternoon I will be reviewing my experience this past summer in Whiteface, South Texas. I go to the University of Oklahoma and I'll be graduating in May of 2017. My interests are production and drilling, but partially because those are the only two things I've been exposed to. One having an internship with Samson Resources and the other being Jordan Energy Company, both in Tulsa, Oklahoma. They're both very just small, couple-week programs. They're just an overview of what exactly oil and gas is and just the industry. And so my career goals are just to gain a second internship next summer, graduate on time in May of 2017, and then upon that, enter into a development program. So this afternoon, I'm going to be talking about goals that I had this summer, safety, the field experience I gained, a specific well, West Level in 176, and then pump off controls in Whiteface. So these goals I set at the beginning of the summer was I want to know where oil and gas goes from the well. I am from Oklahoma, so driving down the street or just out in the country, you see pump jacks go up and down, but I want to know where that goes from the well. The second is I wanted to apply what I learned in school to the field because I have 2 years of school at the University of Oklahoma, and I know a couple things about oil and gas, and I want to apply that to this summer. And the third is everyone in Apache talks about just to keep the fire in the belly, and I wanted to maintain that through the entire summer and just maintain positive about the summer and going into the office, just always asking questions and so on and so forth. And so safety is very important, especially in the field. On top of having weekly meetings, we had monthly mandatory meetings, and I got to see 3 different topics. The first one in May was an asphalt failure meeting, and that was just seeing how important defensive driving is, especially in the early mornings of just trucks going back and forth at 5 a.m. and you always have to be aware and just safe. And the second was a pumping unit observation. And this was just taking the extra 5 minutes of walking around the well rather than driving around the well and just seeing if the well was balanced. And then the third, this past, was aim for zero. And this is just new Apache's culture of just being safe. And it's okay to stop work if it's deemed unsafe and just making sure you have a JSA, MSA, and hot work permits, and everyone's on the same page, but also to maintain the PPE equipment in the field because you never know if your H2S monitor is going to start vibrating because there's gas leak or so on. And so here's just an overview of the Permian region. The star is where I was in Whiteface, the North District. It had 4 leases, the West Lebanon lease, Dean, XIT, and Southwest. It had about 328 producers and 188 injections, making it a water flood, which goes back to the second goal I had of just knowing what I've learned in school to the field because I've learned, or schools talks about water flood systems, and so I got to see that with my hands-on experience of just injecting water and then having the cycle of just going to the well. And it has about a 12 to 1 ratio of oil to water, and it makes about 1,200 MCFs of gas. And so the first 4 weeks, I rode around with pumpers. And in Whiteface, it was just all about maintaining and optimizing production. And each pumper has pride in their work of just going to the well and maintaining that production, of just having their specific wells and injections and reading the injection rates once a month, of shooting the wells once a month and maintaining that fluid level either in the pumping unit or the subs. But also just having the pride of just inputting Avocet in each day and just the daily production. And so here are just various pictures of the summer, maintaining the gas reading in the lower left hand, various heater treaters, vessels, headers, free auto knockout, shooting wells in the upper hand, monitoring the POC in the bottom right. And then here at the Dean, I got to see one of the very first couple days was a plugged flow line of the skim tank. So even though we fixed the flow line of just the plugged paraffin in it, we also maintained the oil at the top of the skim tank and maintained the production. And then on the right, since the H pump at the Dean had gone down because of electricity issues because of the storms, there was a problem with it. So I got to see just how to shut off an injection well because it couldn't be producing. And then on the left is the LACT meter, and all the leases except the Dean is sold through the LACT. The Dean is oil hauled as many times a day, and then on the right is just the West Lebanon battery. The next 2 weeks I rode with the mechanic, and the mechanic was just very interesting to see the differences between the H pump and the PD pumps and just the difference of the centrifugal pumps at test sites. And I got to see just the construction and the maintaining of headers. But also the coolest thing I got to see was this crank repair in the far right. And I got to see a complete breakdown of PD pumps. this PD pump specifically. And I got to see how this thing on the right can essentially determine how much water is injected back into the surface, or to the floor. And the next week I rode with the instrument tech. And what we did was went around and shot fluid levels whenever there needed to be a troubleshooting, or also cable cells of just loading the panel boards, or just most importantly of seeing the pump off controls, whether it be Baker or Lufkin, and just monitoring the dynamometer cards of just downhole of the tubing movement or whatever movement there was downhole, if anything. The next week I got to go to Sundown, Texas and see the automation implemented. And this was my very first experience of just seeing the radios and communications between the wells, of going on Signet and seeing how an injection well was shut off and going to that specific well, and it could have just been a replaced fuse. And so fixing that fuse and the injection well was back on track. And then here are just various pictures from the inside of control panels. And on the far right, I actually went to a test site and labeled these wires of what was the inlets, the outlets, of seeing where it goes where, and just seeing the electronics of it all. And so the next 2 weeks I rode with the electrician, and I had never realized how much electricity matters, especially in whiteface, because there are so many artificial lifts. That's how it's run out there. So, and essentially a barrel that could have been down could affect 12 wells and essentially affect 50 barrels of production, which is the entire Southwest lease. And so you could fix this barrel, but also if you go to the HOA switch and try and flip it back on, it could be an inside problem of a breaker, a starter, or a transformer. And so I realized how important electricity is in these old wells. In the past couple days and this next week, I'll be riding with the foreman and the assistant foreman and seeing the workovers. And I got to, when I was with the instrument tech, I got to see a little bit of an acid job. And these past couple days, I got to see a cement retainer drilled into the well, but also a hole in tubing, but also there's parted rods happening all over whiteface, if anything. But it's also good to note, in whiteface there are a limited number of well failures, having maximum of just 4 a month at each lease. And so there's not that many workovers that happen. And here are just various pictures of the summer. The left I got to see, it wasn't Apache's pump, but I got to see another pump breakdown while going to Distribution Now. Unfortunately, I got to see an injection well leak in the process of dig test, and then also the packing of wells, and then taking a sample of the oil and seeing how much water there was in the oil. And so West Lebanon 176, as you can see on the left, has had quite a few failures, especially just box breaks or polish rod breaking, or just the most recent fish and hangs. So I got to go on RodStar, and the instrument tech kind of helped me, guide me through what was happening right now with the rod string, and he let me take it over and see how to replace this rod string so that the gearbox, as you can see, won't be 91% and have a 74% just grade average. And so currently I saw what it was. I saw the dynamometer cards and realized that if you put sinkers in, you change the 7/8 to fiber rod, you maintain your barrels of fluid, you increase your strokes per minute from 9.3 to 10, and your grade goes from a 74 to an 87. And your gearbox isn't nearly as loaded, but also there isn't compression in the rods, as you can see from the negative signs. And so the cost from these fiber rods are about $97 a rod. There's $11 for couplings. The 3/4 are already in the rod string, and you'll have $166 for the sinkers. And the rig time will be various, but even with oil at $50 a barrel, the cost comes out to be between $15,000 and $20,000, essentially paying out definitely within 6 months. From the source of Weatherford case studies, you can see that in specifically West Texas, this is pump-off controls, once automation was implemented and as wells were being drilled, the number of failures decreased. And so this is very important, especially in whiteface, because POCs are very important, knowing that there aren't that many failures and just increasing the pump efficiencies, but also decreasing electricity costs and monitoring the cards and just maintaining that production. But it also, pump-off controls in whiteface cut down on runtime, because most of the wells are 1 to 2 barrels. So you don't want these wells running all the time, because it can cut down on production or not optimize production. And so the lessons learned this summer are just to know the surroundings, just because all around these leases, you never know what could happen. Your H2S monitor could go off, a pump jack could become unbalanced, or just you never know. So you always have to keep your eyes open and just always ask questions, because this was my first field internship and I had no idea what I was about to get myself into. So it was very interesting just to learn what exactly the field process was and how everything is implemented for a reason. And the third is to keep a positive attitude, because especially in whiteface, they're not drilling or having that many workovers. So it's very important just to maintain positive and going in the office of just having the best positive attitude on outlooks and just maintaining that. And the fourth is just be willing to help, because you never know how much you could just hold wrenches for the electrician, or holding anything for someone could just essentially increase time so you can get to the next well or checking. And so I'd like to acknowledge the following people, especially Danny Farg, since he was gone on hip surgery for 8 weeks. And so it was very important just to have me on a schedule of rotating people every 2 weeks and learning everything that the field had to offer, and especially everyone in Whiteface, Houston, and Midland. And now I'd like to open to any questions.
So Abby, you had a pretty good exposure to both Baker and Lufkin pump-off controllers?
Yes, most, West Levelland, it's mostly Baker, and then at the Dean, it is Lufkin.
So which one's better?
I've heard Lufkin is more efficient.
What does that mean?
Lufkin, I don't know, I've heard, it's all about personal preference. Some people at Whiteface North, they prefer the Lufkin, and then Whiteface South, they like the difference of Baker and Lufkin, so it's a little bit of a mixture. But I personally didn't touch any of them, like I would just click pump off or control, so they're both great to me.
Good answer.
That is a politically correct.
Good stay in the middle. So how much did your West Levelland unit, I didn't never see how much it actually made production wise when you moved over to fiber versus steel?
Oh, that isn't like implemented. This was the current rod star, and so that's where it is right now, and so they don't know when it's gonna fail again, just because the fish and hang of just fishing it and hanging it, of just completing the rod and then moving it. So I just went in and I figured just to implement the sinkers and the 3/4 and then put in the fiber on it. So it's not in it right now, but maybe in the future it could.
You've got it on deck.
Yes, on deck.
Abby, do you remember the manufacturer of that pump jack that you analyzed in that rod star? I thought I saw Lufkin listed there. Do you remember?
Oh, I want it.
Okay, right there.
Was it?
Okay, it's Lufkin Mark II. All right. So, a Mark unit versus a conventional unit, do you know the difference?
The Mark unit, I do know the difference between a Mark can have a maximum of, is it 10 strokes per minute there's a difference between the strokes per minute. I know that one is 10 and one is 13, and I know there's a difference between the, how they're handled, but I can get back to you on exactly the differences. I don't know the specifics of it.
I'll follow up Ken's question. If you're driving down the lease road, you've got a Mark unit on one side of the lease and a conventional unit on the other, would you be able to tell the difference between the two, just looking at them?
Yes, one is, the conventional is just, driving down the road, actually I probably couldn't. If I diagnosed it and then like went into more depth I could, but I don't know if I could just monitor it.
Well, there is a way, okay.
Okay, I can,
Conventional's pivot in the beam at the center.
yes.
Mark is pinned back at the end.
They call it a grasshopper.
Oh, okay, yeah, I didn't want to say grasshopper, but I thought that's what it meant by Mark. Okay, yes.
And that speed deal, that's a wives' tale. Don't believe that.
You talked about rod star. Did you ever run any rod boxes? Rod guides on any of the rods?
I did. This was the only well that I ran a rod star on.
Did you get a chance to look at your scout data for your lease operating costs on leases?
I never got to look at Scout.